There was a lot of people making the point, you made it earlier, that Trump looked pretty miserable in court today. And somebody else was having a bad day, Trump's social media company. DJT stock took another nosedive today in the market after they announced possibly millions of more shares could be sold. But guess who is going to get a lot of that stock? Donald Trump himself. And I want you to listen, because this is not bad news for him. It's fantastic news. When all is said and done, Donald Trump could end up with 65% of all of the shares in this company. So sure, you might think, oh my God, he's getting crushed. He's not. Every single share, every dollar is found money. This is all a trick. The trick is to get as many shares as he can, and he's doing that, and then convert it to cash or a loan before people lose interest in this stock and the party ends. Evan, I just keep hearing every day people laughing at him, laughing as the stock is going down, saying he's losing his shirt. His stake was worth $5 billion. Now it's only worth $2 billion. But it is still worth $2 billion. He did not have to spend one single dollar to get it. He's getting more shares. And in the not so distant future, he could get $1 billion payout, and it will be legal.
Stephanie, this is why I come on your show. This is why I come here to the studio. Because earlier I was talking to people that I work with, like, what does this mean, this story about these shares? And we're like, I don't know, it seems bad, I guess. But this is why we come and talk to you, because you know what's really going on. I mean, the fact is, we know the guy needs money. He's in a lot of positions in that right to give money to the city of New York, state of New York for like a lot of money that has to come up. He needs it. You're telling me it looks good to have a stock, if you can get out of it before it tanks. I guess it makes sense. But again, like I feel better about my own stock tips now that I know that I've heard you talk.
It's stunning that he's in this position. And here we are, Christy, the company behind the $175 million bond, Don Henke, that guy in L.A. that was giving Trump this money for the bond last week. Well, the deadline was tonight for the paperwork that he didn't get in last night. He still hasn't gotten the paperwork through. But even if he doesn't, hasn't Trump already won? Because what he needed was time, and he just got it.
I mean, I guess we'll see, but it is interesting. The fact that that paperwork isn't in, it means that there are no good answers to the questions that the New York AG is asking about whether or not this company is actually liquid, whether or not they are in a position to actually be stable enough to front him this money. Otherwise, this should have been a pretty straightforward filing. The fact that we haven't seen it, another red flag.
Things are very real now in this campaign and this Trump thing with these courts and everything else. We were talking about it for months and months, what was going to happen. And today we're sitting here, we've got millions of dollars at stake that he might be having to take away from him. He's in a criminal court. People should think about what exactly this moment is and what a big change it is in this election from back in the primaries when this was all kind of smoke and mirrors. Someday this will all happen. Well, now it's all happening. And what we're talking about is a lot of bad news piling up for Donald Trump today.
When things stop being polite and start getting real, it is bad news. However, Joyce, Donald Trump allies and Trump keep talking about this two-tier justice system. But if you actually look at it, he has not faced any consequences, not from Mueller, not from the 2 impeachments. Even as people around him have gone to prison for stuff that's happened associated with him, and now he could actually get $1 billion. How is this man not looked at, besides being the luckiest human out there?
Well, I think in some ways that's how he's been looked at up until now, Steph. And right now we're at the point where we find out if he continues to be Teflon coated. Can he get a mistrial? Might there be a hung jury here? Or several weeks down the road, will Donald Trump finally be a convicted felon? People have very different views about this case, but in my view, this is a strong case. Much of it is on paper, showing that these business transactions were fraudulent. The government has said that they'll be able to establish that he made the fraudulent business records in order to conceal or aid in the commission of other crimes involving campaign finance and taxes. And the government, is not bringing this case just for fun. This is not a district attorney who doesn't understand the consequences of bringing a case that's not backed up by evidence. Every appearance we've seen from this immaculately well-prepared trial team has been that they are ready to go and ready to convict this defendant. And if that happens, it will be a changing point in the conversation about Donald Trump and who he is.
It'll be a changing point in U.S. history. Democrats are playing defense when it comes to control of the Senate in November. Their incumbents need to hang on to the hotly contested seats in red states like Montana and Ohio. And I am glad to welcome one of those incumbents, Democratic Senator Sherrod Brown of Ohio. He's running against Bernie Moreno. You probably haven't heard of him. He's a business guy who has made election denialism a focus of his campaign. Senator, I'm so glad you're here tonight. We know that the top issue for voters in your state and across this country is the economy. Inflation's an issue. But how do you make them care that the presumptive Republican nominee is on trial right now for election interference, and he's got 3 more on the way? You know, things like that feel abstract to the voter, but they're the very foundation of what makes our democracy work.
Well, I focus on my job. I know plenty for the pundits to talk about on politicians in Washington and media people. And I think it's one of the reasons people don't much like Washington. And my focus is, like today, I was in Toledo this morning, and I did an event with 2 people that were paying way more for their insulin than they can afford there now because of what we've done, bringing the cap the price of insulin to $35 a month. And in the future, we're going to put a limit on out-of-pocket costs for prescription drugs for Medicare. It's those issues that people listen to. Those issues are what people vote on. And the rest is, for most voters, the rest is background noise.
But then let's talk about that. Because the president is actually passing historic legislation when it comes to helping consumers, the average American, deal with the economy and deal with things like inflation, whether it's shrinkflation or forgiving student debt or, as you said, prescription drug prices. President Biden is doing a lot. How do you get the voters in your state to know this, to understand it, and to give them credit for it?
Well, first of all, we have to do more. I certainly talk about it. I mean, we're running ads right now about what we've done on the PACT Act so that veterans exposed to those football field-sized burn pits in Iraq and Afghanistan are getting treatment. It's named after a young man in Ohio who passed away from an illness after exposure to that. We've passed our pension bill. And again, named after an Ohioan, which restored the pension of 100,000 union workers just in my state alone, 1 million, and mostly in the Midwest. But we've got to do more. When you go to Connie and I go to the grocery store often after church on Sunday early afternoon, and I see people that, they're not happy with food prices, but they understand that it's about corporate greed. Every time you pay more for your food at the grocery store, you're paying for stock buybacks. You're paying for bonuses for corporate executives. And people know that. And our legislation to empower the FTC to crack down on deceptive practices by the food industry that shrink the size of products in the bottles and the packages and the cans while they increase prices. And people know there's a con game out there, and they know that the system, the economy's rigged that way. And that's why I win. I mean, I stand up to those interest groups and will continue to.
House Republicans are sending the impeachment of DHS Secretary Mayorkas to the Senate tomorrow. Will you join your fellow Democrats in voting to skip a full Senate trial?
Yeah, I think that, it's a distraction. I just wish the House would do this. I wish the House would pass the bill dealing would pass our bipartisan border deal, our bipartisan border bill, which will keep the border, which will essentially close off the border and keep our country safer and deal with fentanyl way better than the House has. I wish we would pass the Ukraine bill. I wish they'd pay attention to the real things that matter, not the political games. But this is a House of Representatives in chaos that's always playing political games. We passed, the Senate's not exactly a model of always good government or getting things done quickly, but we passed a strong bipartisan bill in Ukraine. We voted for border security. If the House would follow suit instead of playing these games, our country being allowed, people would be safer. Fewer people, 400 a month die from fentanyl overdose in my state, 400 people every single month. We've got to deal with those issues, and the House of Representatives just wants to keep playing games.
But the problem is political games has become the name of the game. So what do you say to those voters who say the border is an issue and immigration is an issue, who don't realize it was Donald Trump who blocked that bipartisan border deal? Or they're unhappy with inflation, but Donald Trump hasn't offered any policy solutions to address that life's expensive here. How do you get them to understand that?
Well, my job isn't to get them to understand or to weigh in on the presidential race. My job is to do my job, and that's working on our bill to stop those companies from deceptive practices, is to work on the Ukraine bill. Huge Ukrainian community in Cleveland, I believe the third biggest in the country. They're terrified about what's happening in their country, what's happening to their family members. My focus is on getting that done in the Senate, getting those bills passed in the House. Politics, I understand this shows a lot about politics, and, I guess it's what I do for a living, but my job is to get these things done. And the politics really will take care of themselves, even in a state that some people says lean more conservative. Remember in my state, last November, we passed by 13 points, 57% of the vote. The people in this state voted for a constitutional amendment for the state to guarantee abortion rights. The guy you mentioned at the beginning running against me is not just for a nationwide abortion ban, no exceptions. Even in the face of Ohio passing that bill, he's still trying to enact abortion ban, even though even overriding what the voters have. That's why I ask people to come to SherrodBrown.com, sign up and help us fight against that national abortion policy they want, and that digging in support of interest groups instead of taking on the drug companies and Wall Street and the food companies that are jacking prices up.
Hey everyone, MSNBC has a new and improved app. You'll get real-time alerts and analysis, live blogs, in-depth essays, video highlights, and the best 2024 election coverage. Download the new MSNBC app. Here's how to do it. You tap on the App Store on your phone. You hit search on the bottom right corner. You type in MSNBC. You click on the MSNBC app. You click on Get or the cloud icon and enjoy it.